church called the Presbyterian religion. There's lots of different, the Huguenots are another Protestant faith. The Lutherans, of course, are the ones associated with Martin Luther and so on. The odd one is the British did separate from the church because of Henry VIII, because he couldn't get his divorce. And yet, when you look at the dogma of the British church, which, for us it's called the Episcopal Church, right, in the United States. It was called the Church of England up until the Revolution, and you couldn't really want to be sworn fealty to the king once you were in a revolution that overthrew him, right? So it became the Episcopal Church. But when you look at the dogma, they're very close to the actual Roman Catholic dogma until they started having elections and committees, and they started changing things. For example, making the all the work in English. They translated everything into English. And remember that King James, we associate the King James version of the Bible with King James, obviously, although it was initiated by Elizabeth, but she died before it was finished. So we associate the King James Bible with not only the English church, but also with King James, obviously. And Shakespeare, by the way. In fact, there are people that think Shakespeare might have been part of the team that worked on it. He wasn't a translator. He didn't have Greek and little Latin, but he might have been invited to help with the poetry. Who knows? But handwriting analysis and new techniques of trying to analyze the language hasn't really turned up anything. In fact, the fun thing for me is that it seems like it might have actually been that Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare. You've heard that. Francis Bacon might have been. That's my favorite. It's Francis Bacon might have written the plays and basically used Shakespeare as a fence. Because Bacon, and I'll start with him. So we'll start with the moderns. And Francis Bacon is really the earliest. He's not considered the first modern philosopher officially because Descartes is called that. For some, there's lots of different reasons, but they frequently refer to René Descartes, Descartes. Yes? Which, that might be interesting because Descartes literally means the map, or like the Magna Carta, the big paper, it's called the Magna Carta because it's a big page, big sheet of paper. The Magna Carta, that was like the document that they got King John to sign, so he gave up part of his power as the monarch because they didn't like John. In fact, it was also about the same period that they started referring to toilets as Johns. Just as kind of, they used to call them Jakes, which is interesting, instead of a John. Okay. But so Francis Bacon, Verulium is one of his titles, was one of those polymaths, good at everything. He was important in the council for the king and so on, and so he was an important counselor, although as the head of the treasury at one point there was charges brought against him. By the way, those are probably political. It wasn't really his fault, but they charged him, and as a result he was fired, and so he lost his position. But in any case, he wrote a lot of things, and possibly, they say even the Shakespeare corpus. There is a text, they have a handwritten document where he literally tried out bunches of different names, writing names and signatures, and then finally you could see the last one he ended up with was William Shakespeare. So it's like he's trying to figure out, hey, what should I write as my name? And why, by the way, would he have had a fence to front for him? Or that's another name for it, right? A front for that is because that would have been beneath him to write those kinds of entertainments when he was really so highly placed in the government and everything. In any case, the things that he's most known for philosophically are the new tool. Remember, for Aristotle, the logic texts were all grouped together and called the organon, which means tool, and that gives us the logic, basically, right? Well, Francis Bacon, in thinking, what we need is a new tool that will help us do better science. And so he writes a book called The Novum Organum, the new tool, and it's really all about the things we have to do in order to make sure we're doing good science. And there's 4 things that we have to avoid. We have to avoid the idols of the cave, he calls them. Actually, the idols of the cave are one type of idols. Let me double check here. Nope, that still won't go on. But Francis Bacon. Idols. Okay, so he calls them the idols of the mind, and one of them is the idols of the cave. Okay, so the first one is the idols of the tribe. So these are the ones that are like, the things that your family basically believes in that are not true. You just have a family that all, for some reason, the whole family all believes certain things. And guess what? You really should check those because they might not be true. The idols of the tribe have their foundations in human nature itself. I think this is a quote from him. And in the tribe or race of men, for it is a false assertion that the sense of man is the measure of things. On the contrary, all perceptions as well as the sense as of the mind are according to the measure of the individual and not according to the measure of the universe. And the human understanding is like a false mirror, which, receiving rays irregularly, distorts and discolors the nature of things by mingling its own nature with it. Next are the idols of the cave, and these are the idols where the problems of individuals, their passions and enthusiasms, and I'll quote, "The idols of the cave are the idols of the individual man, for everyone, besides the errors common to human nature in general, has a cave or den of his own, which refracts and discolors the light of nature, owing either to his own proper and peculiar nature, or to his education and conversation with others, or to the reading of books and the authority of those whom he esteems and admires, or to the differences of impressions accordingly as they take place in a mind preoccupied and predisposed, or in a mind indifferent and settled, or the like, etc." So it's your own individual mistakes that you have to reevaluate. You can't just believe the things that you keep believing. You have to test them. The idols of the marketplace. So this is a broader one, and this one is associated with your association with other men and each other on account of the commerce and consort of men there. How everyone all can believe things in the marketplace that are just wrong as well. And the final idol is the theater, the idols of the theater. This is actually the church, by the way, because where's the theater? At the time, if you went to see a play, it was usually on the steps of the church, and the square in front of that was kind of the area that would have been where all the people gathered to watch the elevated actors because they're on the steps of the church. So basically this is a disguised way of saying that the church's teachings are basically idols that you should test scientifically and so on. So Francis Bacon, one of the significant ones, and one of the people that he had influence on was Thomas Hobbes. In fact, he said that Thomas Hobbes was the smartest student he ever had. Now, he wasn't actually a teacher. He had a relationship with him, a kind of a mentor, I suppose. But in any case, not like in Cambridge or Oxford, which I think both of them were there at the time. In any case, so when we're looking now at Thomas Hobbes and René Descartes, Thomas Hobbes was born 8 years earlier than René Descartes, and he's going to die about 20 or so years later. Descartes only lived about 54 years, very short life in general, compared to Hobbes, who lasted like 90 years. And in fact, it's kind of funny because Hobbes is famous for saying that life is nasty, brutish, and short. There's a few more adjectives there too. I'm not remembering all of them. But basically life really sucks as far as Hobbes is concerned. And yet he's the one that lives till he's 90. He has a pension. He's playing tennis. He's famous. All kinds of things that you would think, that's not really a nasty, brutish, or short life. He's got it made in the shade. But he was scared. He was born early, prematurely. And what he believes brought on his early birth was the Armada, which was about to, remember Elizabeth on her white horse. I don't know if you saw the movie. It's, really, really neat, how she's riding up and down with hardly any army, in case the Armada actually landed. But fortunately, the fire ships attacked first they had a storm, right? And the storm, the Armada captain said, let's tie all the ships together so that we're safe from the storm. And then Sir Walter Raleigh led 4 ships that were set on fire, that were sailed into the pack of ships, and the whole Armada caught fire and sunk. So the Armada never made it to England, and it bankrupted Spain. Bankrupted Spain, right? And so Elizabeth, yay for us, she didn't have to put up with a Spanish invasion. But while they were expecting the Armada to attack England, am I keeping you awake? Or I don't have music and I don't have all, I could do other things. I could dance, a jig, I suppose. But so while they were expecting the Armada to come, everybody in England was scared to death, and Hobbes's mother gave birth early. And so, he blames it on fear, so it was fear that brought me into the world early, and so he thinks of himself as a child of fear, and he frequently flees England and goes to Europe while England is in the throes of a civil war. They kept fighting one another because of religion, right? And who should be the authority? Should they be a Roman Catholic or whatever? And then when things settled down, he would come back. And when things got topsy-turvy again, he would go back to France. And they liked him in France, so he was happy there. But he, of course, kept coming back. His most important 2T that Thomas Hobbes taught was Charles I's son, Charles, who would, of course, eventually become Charles II. And remember, Charles I is the one that married a Roman Catholic, got everybody upset with him because Roman Catholics, ooh, and how they, plus they liked things, art things and expensive things. They painted their ceilings and their palace and stuff, and he had done all this stuff, making a beautiful palace for his Catholic queen, and the ship with all of the treasures that were taking all the treasures to that castle, that palace, sunk, and everybody in England was like, "See, it was evil, to have all that stuff." But eventually, they chopped off the head of Charles I because he fought against his people. He had an army and